Hey everyone, shout out to all my fans. Coming at you from a different location. Looking a little casual today, actually at Incarnate Word Parish, stealing their internet so I can bring you this video. So let's get started. Oh, gotta share my screen with you. Not in my office, not in my classroom, and all out of the groove, out of the routine. All right, here we go. Today we are talking about end-of-life issues. This is lap 4, day 5. So first thing I'd like you to do is to get your text box, get your textbook. Man, this is rough. Open to page 196 and read the light blue box entitled "The Death Penalty." Be ready to answer the question on its content. So a little bit about the death penalty. And this teaching, the Catholic teaching on this actually just changed in the last year. So this is some exciting breaking news. When you talk about a 2,000-year-old institution, it doesn't change much. This is breaking news. For years, the death penalty was seen as morally acceptable if there was a fair trial and if this was the only way to protect the common good. So it arose out of the teaching of self-defense. It's not an intrinsically evil act if it's the only way to protect citizens from somebody who could hurt them. But today and recently, there's been an increasing recognition of human dignity. And there's also a recognition that, practically speaking, today, we have prisons, we have detention facilities that can permanently house these people who've committed these terrible crimes, that can protect citizens, but also leave open the possibility for redemption for these people who have committed the crimes. So this has all led Pope Francis to say that the death penalty is inadmissible today and that the church should work towards its abolition, so should work towards ending the death penalty throughout the world. So that, again, is a pretty recent change, all in the past year. So just a little bit more about the death penalty. Basically, the Catholic argument with all these end-of-life issues, but specifically the death penalty, is that more death and violence cannot bring healing. So often that is a desire for revenge, oftentimes on the part of the family. And let's acknowledge we can't imagine what some of these families go through, but that more death and violence cannot bring about healing. Also, a recognition that all people are capable of redemption and conversion. All throughout the Gospels, we see Jesus approach people who other people thought were bad, he had written them, others had written them off, and Jesus offers them an opportunity for redemption. And then finally, as we've said, human dignity applies to both the victim and the oppressor. In class, next class, we're actually going to look, there's a secular, meaning non-religious argument against capital punishment as well. One, that it's discriminatory, both by race and by economics. More often than not, the death penalty is given if a Black individual kills a white individual. More often than not, it's given when somebody is poor. I think it's something like 90% of people who get the death penalty cannot afford their own lawyer. It's expensive because people go through so many appeals process. It costs states millions of dollars in legal fees, in time and energy going into these court cases. It's irreversible, right? If you find out, and there have been cases where DNA evidence has said that certain people were innocent who were found guilty, you can't reverse it, obviously. And it's also been found not to deter crime. It's also been found not to deter crime. It doesn't stop people from committing acts. And actually, the areas in which there are more capital punishments, there's actually more violent crime. So suicide. Obviously, this is an extremely touchy topic. It's one that unfortunately has affected many of you. You have heard of someone, maybe someone from grade school, someone you know well. And I think it's important to recognize the pain that suicide causes speaks to it being a tragic and morally wrong action, that it's a rejection of the gift of life. It's the ultimate rejection of someone saying to God, I don't want this life. But Catholic teaching is a little more nuanced than it used to be. It used to be kind of, well, if you commit suicide, of course you're going to hell. But recently, I think there's been a greater recognition of the psychological disturbances, the anguish, the grave fear of hardship, suffering, or torture. And again, it doesn't make the action good, but it lessens one's culpability for committing suicide. Right? Just as we talked about certain fears, certain mental disorders, certain pressures, certain terror can lessen one's culpability. It's the same thing with suicide. Again, I think we recognize that this is not right. This is not a good action. You see the pain, you see the reverberations of these actions. So it's clearly something that's not good. But the culpability to recognize that someone who commits suicide, in a lot of ways, they're a victim of illness. Just as cancer takes people's lives, so does mental illness. They're not damned to hell. And that ultimately, we're called to trust in God's intimate and infinite mercy. I'm actually going to change that. Trust in God's intimate, loves each of us, and infinite mercy. Final thing that I want to talk about is euthanasia, or physician-assisted suicide, also known as mercy killing. So we're going to look at this one in class a little bit more, but the pro-physician-assisted suicide basically says that just as we have a right to life, people should be able to choose when they die, that it's mercy for someone in pain to give them death. This person is often a burden on society, and that if this person has to live with an illness, it affects their dignity. The Catholic stance, there's been studies done into this, and most victims cite psychological suffering, not physical. So it's not the physical pain, but it's the feelings of being alone. It's the feelings of being hopeless. And it's not so much about the physical pain. And so maybe, right, we need to treat that psychological suffering better. That would be the Catholic stance. We need to not view those who are sick as burdens and thus disposable. That accepting euthanasia sets a dangerous precedent for those who are considered undesirable. As Catholics, as Christians, right, Jesus saves humanity through suffering, and somehow we believe that suffering can be salvific. Joy and hope can be found. We must better treat depression in these terminal cases, but this does not mean we have to prolong life at all costs, right? Hooking people up to machines, never letting them die, but there's a difference between allowing someone to die and then intentionally ending someone's life. There's also a lot of discussion about, from a secular argument, that this goes against a doctor's oath to do no harm to patients. The doctors take an oath to do no harm, and that it's damaging to the role of a doctor if, right, you allow them to essentially commit these mercy killings on individuals who no longer want to live. So that is it for today. I know there are a lot of different topics there. We're going to get into those a little bit more next class, kind of have a chance to discuss all these different issues and the complexities of these end-of-life issues. So as always, like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, Incarnate Word Parish, for letting me use your internet, and I look forward to seeing all of you in class.